Day. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. To access free prayer resources that guide you in prayer and to see updates about the COVID-19 virus, go to pausetopray.org.
A judge in Nevada said that casinos had more rights than churches do.
The culture war rages in America.
We have to be very, very suspicious of this transition in our society that's being forced on us by movements like Black Lives Matter and Antifa.
It's a threat to our families, a threat to our future as a nation.
And so what we see happening in our society is the empowerment of the spiritual darkness that will allow the slaughter of children.
Hosted by Walker Wildman, the upcoming AFA at Home virtual town hall brings vital insight from defenders of the faith, Dr. Richard Land, Star Parker, Abraham Hamilton III, Sandy Rios, the Benham Brothers, and Tim Barton. AFA at Home streams live Thursday, October 8th at 7 p.m. Central at afaaction.net. Register for free at afaaction.net.
This is a spiritual battle, and we all are required to toe the line and take a stand.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio. Let me make an announcement here briefly. If you are in the Macomb, Mississippi area, Macomb, Mississippi, I can feel some people's ears perking up. I will be preaching for 3 days in Macomb, Mississippi at the West Macomb Baptist Church, October 16th, 17th, and 18th. The church invited me to participate in their revival meetings. And I have to tell you, I am looking forward to being there. So if you are in the area, or if you're near the area and you want to be a part of the meetings, please mark your calendars now. I asked them if they wanted me to share this information on the air because some places where I travel to, especially in light of some states and some cities, COVID requirements, they have different kind of regulations and other things. But the West Macomb Baptist Church said, nope, we're good to go. We have enough space to do what we need to do to keep people safe and to turn our hearts to the fire of the Lord. So again, if you're in the if you're in the Macomb, Mississippi area or willing to come to Macomb, Mississippi, West Macomb Baptist Church is the name of the church. And I will be there October 16th, 17th, and 18th preaching the word of God. I'm excited about it, Rob. All right. Foolishness du jour, shall we? Oh, my goodness, oh, my. It's a lot. It's been a lot lately, every day. I'm telling you guys, I run out of show before I run out of stuff. The last 24 hours has revealed what I think may very well be an indication as to what we can expect with the massive amount of mail-in ballots that will most likely be a part of this November election. What am I talking about? I have in my hands a press release from the United States Department of Justice for the Middle District of Pennsylvania. I'll read from the press release. At the request of the Luzerne County District Attorney, Stephanie Salvantis, the Office of the United States Attorney, along with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Scranton Resident Office, began an inquiry into reports of potential issues with a small number of mail-in ballots at the Luzerne County Board of Elections. Since Monday, FBI personnel, working together with the Pennsylvania State Police, have conducted numerous interviews and recovered and reviewed certain physical evidence. Election officials in Luzerne County have been cooperative. At this point, get ready. Here's the main part of the press release. At this point, we can confirm that a small number of military ballots were discarded. They were discarded. Now, I'm going to get back to the press release, but I'm going to just translate for y'all. Y'all know what discarded means? They were put in the trash can. They were put in the trash can is what happened. Well, is there anything particular about these ballots, Abe? Back to the press release. Quote, investigators have recovered 9 ballots at this time. Some of those ballots can be attributed to specific voters, and some cannot. Here's another major takeaway. All 9 ballots were cast for presidential candidate Donald Trump. Our inquiry remains ongoing, and we expect later today to share our up-to-date findings with officials in Luzerne County. So do you guys know what I just read to you from the United States Attorney's Office? That U.S. attorney is David J. Freed in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. In America, our military service members request ballots to participate in elections. It's part of the absentee process, because in the absentee process, you have to give a reason why you can't vote in person. If you're in the military overseas, that's probably a good reason why you can't vote in person. Well, a little birdie notified the district attorney in Luzerne County that certain military service members' ballots disappeared. And the one thing that they all had in common, all of them, not some of them, every single ballot that was discarded. They were all ballots of people who had voted for President Trump. Abraham, that was just a small amount. Of course it's just a small amount. We're just in November. I'm sorry, we're just in September. We're not in November yet. But do you think it's just a coincidence that all 9 ballots just happen to have been cast for the same presidential candidate? Maybe. Maybe not. And that's not all. And in fact, let me play this first before I get into this next part of this story, because next we're going to hop on over to Greenville, Wisconsin, where there the United States Postal Service is conducting an investigation. But I want you, before I do that, listen briefly to United States Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany discussing this very issue. Clip number 1.
The president wants to get rid of mass mail-out voting, and that's not because he said clearly that could go either way. It could damage either candidate's chances, because it's a system that's subject to fraud. In fact, in the last 24 hours, police in Greenville, Wisconsin found mail in a ditch, and it included absentee ballots. And also, I can confirm for you that Trump ballots, ballots for the president, were found in Pennsylvania, and I believe you should be getting more information on that shortly. Here in the last 24 hours, they were found cast aside.
So, that latter part you just heard me talk about. In Pennsylvania, Trump ballots in the trash. And I've said before, the issue is not with mailing exclusively. It's identifying who is voting, but in addition, it presents multiple opportunities for people to get involved. Do I need to remind us about the prosecutions that our own Department of Justice have pursued about the elections officials in Philadelphia who were indicted for receiving money from various candidates, adjusting the ballots according to the people that he wanted to have elected, and doing it for years? Do we need to talk about that? It presents more opportunities for fraud. So now let's hop on over to Wisconsin. The U.S. Postal Service in Greenville, Wisconsin, is conducting an investigation after mail, all manner of parcels of mail, including absentee ballots, was found in a ditch on the side of the road in Wisconsin. Now, of course, it could be that the mail just maybe fell out of a truck. That could happen. But don't you think if that would have happened, somebody would at some point say, man, especially if their job is delivering mail, would say, wait, I think I dropped something. Let me go back. Or could it be that somebody ditched the mail into the ditch? According to United States Post Office spokesperson Bob Sheehan, he said this, quote, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service immediately began investigating, and we reserve further comment on this matter until it is complete, the investigation he's referring to. Mr. Sheehan explained that it is unclear how many pieces of mail were involved, but it is clear that the mail included absentee ballots. I shared on today's issues my very own story. I haven't lived in Louisiana for at least half a decade. I got in the mail an invitation to vote in Louisiana. I don't think anybody did anything intentionally, but it just reveals the potential for fraud. Not everybody's going to be like me. Said, no, I don't live there. And by the way, this isn't the first time it happened. The first time it happened to me was Hurricane Katrina. I can understand that. I got correspondence. At that time, I was living in Houston, Texas, invited me to vote in Louisiana. I had to write back and say, oh, because of Katrina, I've moved, et cetera, et cetera. There's no Katrina with this one. And it just shows that, folks, the truth is, in states all across the country, that voter rolls are not always kept up to date with the most current information. So if I were to respond to the invitation, I would have the opportunity to vote in Louisiana and where I'm living now, if I wanted to break the law. And all of this follows, and I don't think I've discussed this on the Hamilton Corner yet, but state court rulings further expanding the parameters to allow for, they would argue, and many would argue, the preservation of every person's vote counting. Others would argue, and I would be in the camp of the others, that this leaves room for the potential for more fraud and abuse. What am I talking about? Michigan. In its state court system, a lower court judge, Cynthia Diane Stevens, unilaterally changed, in her view, the state's election laws. In Michigan, this state court judge ruled that any ballot postmarked by 5 p.m. on November 2nd could be counted for up to 2 weeks after Election Day. Counted up to 2 weeks. That's 14 days after Election Day. Not only did the ruling do that, you know what else the ruling did? It changed Michigan's law, which previously required anyone who would deliver a ballot by mail, the delivery had to come from either a family member, an election official, or a mail carrier. The person delivering the mail-in ballot had to be a family member, an election official, or a mail carrier. Now, in Michigan, anybody can bring the ballot in. Anybody. Anybody, Jeff? Anybody. So could local political operatives collect ballots and deliver them? Yes. Could local candidates for office collect ballots and deliver them? Yes. And how much time do they have? They can do that for up to 2 weeks after Election Day. Previously, ballots had to be in by 8 p.m. on Election Day. But wait, there's more. Pennsylvania's state Supreme Court had a ruling that said the state of Pennsylvania will accept mail-in ballots without proof of being postmarked by November 3rd. So the ballot doesn't even have to be postmarked by Election Day in Pennsylvania anymore. Previously, you had to have the postmark in order for them to be considered to be appropriately mailed-in ballots. And again, it had to be received in Pennsylvania by 8 p.m. on Election Day. Now, that is no longer the case. In both of these instances, the courts are saying that these are unique times because of coronavirus, that these things are necessary. And again, I just always ask, and I left something out. I left something out that may be important to you. The lawsuit in Michigan was filed by a group called Michigan Alliance for Retired Americans. But you know who was the supporting, look, I got my air quotes up, the supporting entity for this group of Michigan Alliance for Retired Americans? Mark Elias, who is an election lawyer who works for Perkins Coie in Washington, D.C. Remember that law firm? It just happened to be the same law firm that paid Christopher Steele on behalf of the Democrat Party for the Steele dossier. And, did I also mention that Mark Elias is also working with Joe Biden's presidential campaign? Did they tell you that part? Yeah, so you have Joe Biden's, a person working with his campaign who just happens to find plaintiffs to file lawsuits. In this instance, let's just stick with this one, to file this lawsuit in the state of Michigan that resulted in Michigan's, a lower court judge in their state system, changing their election laws. How does that make you feel? Y'all can think we're people playing if you want to. Folks, this is happening right now. In one state, they're letting anybody can bring the mail-in ballots. And they got 14 days to do it after an election. And in another state, they're saying the ballots don't even have to be postmarked by Election Day. And they're going to be accepted and counted. Now, in both instances, their state legislatures have the authority to reverse these decisions. But if they don't, guess what's going to happen? Y'all can play checkers if you want while these folks are playing chess. They are openly broadcasting what they're planning to do. Is there any wonder now where you have so many of these talking heads who say things like, President Trump may look like he's the winner of the election on Election Day, but after Election Day, the tally will come in and show that Joe Biden is the victor. These people got plans, folks. And this is crazy. And again, the issue with the ballots being dumped on the side of the road and the military ballots not being selected, can you imagine 80 million ballots will be sent in by mail in this election cycle?
From the earliest day, the goal of those who had come to America was to advance the glory of God and to advance the Christian faith.
Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
The calling that God has on America, it's a calling that's never changed. This is still God's calling on the United States of America, and that is to fulfill the Great Commission.
Listen weekday afternoons at 1 Central on American Family Radio.
In Acts chapter 1:8, when he says we're to be witnesses, he says in Jerusalem. Judea, that was the surrounding area. Samaria, now we're getting into a cross culture.
The wrong side of the tracks.
The wrong side of the tracks, wrong people, and to the uttermost parts of the earth.
Exploring Missions with Bert Harper. Saturday evenings at 6:30 Central and Sunday afternoons at 1 on American Family Radio.
That's what he said. You shall be my witnesses.
God's good from bad. This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. 2020 has been a hard year. The global pandemic has caused death and government shutdowns. Civil unrest is taking place in the streets over accusations of injustice, and now a contentious election. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." So what's the good that God is causing? One example is a greater platform for the gospel. Pastors like John MacArthur, whose church is meeting despite government shutdown orders, are being interviewed on national TV and taking the opportunity to proclaim the gospel of Christ. Hear more examples at thechristianworldview.org and then tune in this weekend for another topic that will sharpen your worldview.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes with news and commentary next.
Wondering how you'll finish your degree now? At Liberty University, we want to help. So when you transfer into one of our more than 100 undergraduate online programs this fall, you could earn up to $3,600 in transfer student scholarships, or more if you live in Virginia. That means you could pay less than $900 per course and transfer in up to 75% of your degree. That's up to 90 credits. Save time and money at a school that's been helping students like you for over 30 years. Learn more by texting degree to 49595. That's degree to 49595.
The Santa Barbara Unified School District in California approved a new sex education curriculum for 8th graders. Soon, youngsters will learn about sex acts we're not even allowed to talk about on the radio. They'll also learn how to get an abortion without their parents ever knowing. Kathy Ireland, the former supermodel, is among the outraged parents. She said representatives from Planned Parenthood showed up at her child's driver's ed class. Ireland said the graphic sex ed classes violate the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. She went on to say it over-sexualizes our children. It violates our children, and it does not deal with the aftermath. The perverse lessons were approved by the mostly liberal school board, and they point out their policies are actually in line with statewide rules on sex education. Government-sanctioned pornography. That's what it is, folks. Be sure to listen to my national radio show live, noon to 3 Eastern, or you can download my free podcast at toddstarnes.com.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Sunshine and Rainbows Hour here on American Family Radio. Folks, I'm just sharing the information, not for the purpose, not to get anybody in a listful disposition or to be despondent, because God is still on the throne. But I'm just revealing that these are the things that are happening on the ground. We will open the phone lines this segment if you want to hop in to the corner and converse with me. You're welcome to do so. The number to call is 888-589-8840. The number again is 888-589-8840. Anything we've discussed today is on the table for conversation. You're welcome to weigh in those areas. As the callers are coming in, I don't know how many people saw this. The video was just striking of this. In Seattle, right, Seattle, rioters with Antifa were again rioting, and there was one guy who took an aluminum baseball bat and struck a police officer in the back of the head with an aluminum baseball bat. Now, the officer had a helmet on, but after the incident, the local police department posted photos of the helmet showing how the bat had cracked the helmet. You heard me right. An aluminum baseball bat to the back of the police officer's head. The Seattle Police Department released a statement last night saying, quote, in total, officers arrested 13 people for charges ranging from property destruction, resisting arrest, and failure to disperse, as well as assault on an officer. Multiple officers were injured, including the one who was struck in the head with a baseball bat, cracking his helmet, end quote. Folks, this is happening. Earlier this week, the U.S. Justice Department announced that Seattle, New York City, and Portland are now defined by the DOJ as anarchist jurisdictions. Anarchist jurisdictions. The DOJ released the following as criterion it used to determine what would consist or what would comprise an anarchist jurisdiction. And this is what they released. Quote, whether a jurisdiction forbids the police from intervening to restore order amidst widespread or sustained violence or destruction. Whether a jurisdiction has withdrawn law enforcement protection from a geographical area or structure that law enforcement officers are lawfully entitled to access, but have been officially prevented from accessing or permitted to access only in exceptional circumstances, except when law enforcement officers are briefly withheld as a tactical decision intended to resolve safely and expeditiously a specific and ongoing unlawful incident posing an imminent threat to the safety of individuals or law enforcement officers. Number 3, whether a jurisdiction disempowers or defunds police departments. Number 4, whether a jurisdiction unreasonably refuses to accept offers of law enforcement assistance from the federal government. Number 5, any other related factors the Attorney General deems appropriate. That's the catch-all clause. This is happening, folks, right now. In addition to that, yesterday I talked a little bit. I didn't go into too much detail, but I talked a little bit about the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville, Kentucky, where, man, what a case. Well, as we discussed yesterday, and Jeff so eloquently shared, that it seemed like protests in the box showed up in Louisville, Kentucky. That as soon as the indictment decision was announced, U-Haul trucks showed up. And we shared with you yesterday that the U-Haul just so happened to be rented by a Soros fellow. Literally a Soros fellow from one of his organizations. That when the U-Haul truck showed up, they had riot gear, shields, banners, masks. They just happened to have that on hand. You know, that was just a spontaneous response, you know. That was a spontaneous response to what was going on. And last night, 2 police officers were shot. 2 Louisville Metropolitan Police Department officers were shot. 1 suspect has been arrested for shooting to police officers. In addition to that, he's charged with 14 counts of wanton endangerment on a police officer and 2 counts of assault on a police officer. As far as I understand it, the police officers are still living. They were not murdered by these shots. But folks, are in many parts of our country, it's becoming unhinged. It's becoming unhinged. And this is sad, man. When you have, Antifa taking baseball bats and hitting police officers in the head in the middle of the street. In the middle of the street. Everybody knows today that there are cameras everywhere. Not just government cameras, but cell phone cameras. And, of course, they have their black bloc attire on, trying to cover their faces and cover their identities as they're taking bats to the back of the heads of police officers. We need to pray for our country. Jeff, if you have that information handy, would you remind the listener? Can you, or you want to tell me again? I'll give a minute to get this together, because I want you guys to hear this, because this is not just my opinion, folks. This is happening in our country. Many of these riots, setting cities on fire, hitting police officers in the back of the head with baseball bats, this is not spontaneous. Much of this is pre-planned. Jeff, share with the listeners the information you got yesterday.
The name of the person that rented the U-Haul was Holly Zoller. Now, the video showed them unloading shields, gas masks, weapons, banners, and some water and things like that. But basically, she is on the board of the Louisville Bail Initiative. And at least 2 people on the board of Louisville Bail Initiative were Soros Justice Fellows, and she's one of them. And we did play on Focal Point earlier. We had somebody that posed as the U-Haul
calling her up and saying what happened, and she said she was just delivering umbrellas and water and rubber gloves and stuff, and he called her on that. And but she admitted on the phone call that she was the one that drove it down there and was helping deliver this stuff. So
when she was
called at that point, she asked for a lawyer.
Ah.
She knew she had admitted something that she shouldn't have.
So she was just delivering water and umbrellas. She left out the shields and the masks and the sticks and then as the conversation goes on, I think I need a lawyer.
Yeah.
This is happening, folks. To the phone lines we go. We'll start in Los Angeles. We'll start in Louisiana, where James is on the line. James, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for taking my call, sir. I'm a U.S. Army retiree, and I have a question regarding to this election that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The President of the United States and the lawmakers have standards by the Constitution as their requirements, when they can be elected, and those type of things. And they go on a ballot on the states at a certain period of time. Now, the states throw all their stuff in on that day so they can save money. And what they do, though, is they require the president, federal elected officials, to be under the same election standards as the state. Now, I was thinking, why can't the federal government say, if you're going to vote for the president, the vice president, and other elected federal officials, you will appear with a ID card. If you mail it in, there'll be an ID card. Anybody would have to present an ID card. Nobody can send it in, take it in for you, other than the DHS. DHS can go to nursing homes and other areas and pick up those. And
all right, James, thank you for your call and your question. So if I'm following you correctly, what you present is a question of federalism. So the U.S. Constitution expressly establishes the dates and deadlines for federal elections. But because of our constitutional republic form of government, that states do rightly have the authority to govern their election processes. And it actually is the opposite. Many states, well, not many, all of the states set their state elections generally to correspond with the federal elections instead of vice versa. And so it would be a violation of federalism for the federal government to establish each state's election guidelines. So I understand what you're saying, and I share your frustration, but that is a simple reason why things are the way they are in these areas. And again, with the particulars of the states I mentioned today, the state legislatures have the authority to remind the court that its role is not a legislative role, and that the legislature has the ultimate authority to determine the election rules for each state. We'll go next to Arkansas, where Bo is on the line. Bo, thank you for calling the Hamilton Corner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Just want to encourage you because I actually came from a communist country many years ago, and I saw the unraveling of the, I've been unfortunate to see the unraveling of the American culture and how it's being dismantled. I came from Chicago, where Saul Alinsky was very prominent in the culture over there in the Democratic Party, and I see the same tactics that the communists used to destroy nations and then come in and bully and then loot and then destroy. So I want to encourage you that, and your listeners, this is not a joke. People will take away everything that you have worked for, and only by the grace of God are we saved. So may we turn to Him and glorify Him in all things we do.
Amen. But would you mind sharing with the listeners the country that you came from, or would you rather not?
Yeah, I can. I came from Bulgaria. It's a country where was sold out by when World War II finished, the greatest form of known slavery to mankind, when Stalin turns to FDR and Churchill and says, "Oh yeah, by the way, these 6 countries belong to the USSR." There was Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia at that time, which was known, Hungary, and that was 125 million people were just sold off to the communists because no one wanted to lift a finger when they just got done fighting a war, and they let that go. So just think about that. And then from then on, for 50 years, the oppression that occurred behind that Iron Curtain was devastating. And but history books will not. If the leftists get their way, they'll eliminate that and make Karl Marx be the gentle grandfather, somewhat akin to Santa Claus, in the way he brought prosperity and help to everyone, which is a total joke. That's why communism has never flourished anywhere. It's only destroyed. Look at Venezuela. My gosh, they had so much oil. Now their last oil production's done, and that country is in ruins thanks to the Communist Party. But hey, it's all around. God shows you enough. He's always showing you enough to open your eyes. But there are too many people out there with their eyes closed and think it's not going to happen to our shores. Well, Pearl Harbor and 9/11 should remind people that we are not isolated enough that we cannot be touched by evil.
Well said, Bo. Folks, it happened in Bulgaria, first-hand testimony for the country where he came from. I've said before, what we're witnessing now is a rinse and repeat in what happened to turn Russia into communist Russia, for example. And not just Russia, but other nations around the world as well. Let us open our eyes, open our hearts, and let us resolve in our hearts that we will obey the Lord no matter what. This is the moment that God has allowed us to be born into. This is our moment. Let us make sure that when we stand before the Lord and we're asked how do we respond in this moment, that we may be positioned to hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." And remember that the Lord only dispatches well dones for those who have done well. God bless you.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.